Hello class, this is our last homework of the semester, homework 29 on quadratic equations. So this section is all about quadratic equations. Remember that when we use the equation word, we mean there's an equal sign, we're solving for x, something like that. So it's going to make this different than factoring when we were just working with expressions. So this is a linear equation, something we had back in Unit 2. Now you know that it's called linear because it looks like the graph of a line. So if I wanted to solve something like this, I would subtract 10 from both sides. I get 2x equals 2. Divide both sides by 2, and I get x equals 1. So sort of the standard process for a linear equation was just moving terms around until we got that x by itself. And there's going to be a slightly different process for these quadratic equations. When we talk about a quadratic equation, we mean one that has an x squared term in it. We are, in this class, going to focus on solving quadratic equations with factoring. Any of you going on to take college algebra, you'll learn some other methods. What if it doesn't factor, that it is still possible to find a solution? But everything we work with will be things that we can factor. So with this particular one here, I'll just walk through the steps. Step 1 is to get equal 0 to one side, and that's been done in this first sample equation. Step 2 is to factor. So this is going to have two positive factors, and we need to multiply to give us 4 and add to give us 4, so they actually are 2 and 2. This is one of those perfect squares from homework 28. Then we're going to set each factor equal to 0. And we solve those two separate linear equations. And so we actually, in this case, got the same number, and that's because if you think of the visual I told you earlier, in this case, the u, which I'm going to draw really terribly, looks like that, and it just touches right at -2. That's why we only get one solution here. So here is one. We're going to follow our 4 steps. So step 1, get 0 to one side. Someone's been nice and done that for us already. Step 2, factor it. Somebody's been extra nice and taking care of that. Step 3, set each factor equal to 0. And step 4, solve each one of those equations. So we get k equals 1, and the other solution is k equals -5. Be careful when you're doing the homework. It'll tell you sometimes to either write the two answers in 2 different blocks or to separate them with a comma. So make sure you follow the instructions. Again, if something like that happens on a test, you should always send it to me so I can give you the points back. Equal to 0, that's taken care of, remember, because that's going to mean we're looking for the factors to equal 0. Step 2 hasn't been done for us. It's not factored. So that's our step 2 goal. The 24 is positive. That tells me the same sign. The 11 is negative. That tells me they are both negative. So I get to this point from looking at those two signs. So I'm looking for numbers that multiply to 24, but are going to add to -11. -1 and -24 give me -25. -2 and -12 gives me -14. -3 and -8 is -11. So those were the factors we were looking for. Now this isn't a factoring problem, so we're not done. That's just step 2. Step 3 is to set each factor equal to 0, because either this or this has to be 0 in order to get a product of 0. And And if I add 3 to both sides, we get x is 3 or x is 8. Again, we're going to walk through our 4 steps. Set it equal to 0, done. Factor it, that isn't done for us, so we're going to have to do that. The 18 is negative, so that tells me we have to have one of each, one positive and one negative. The 3 is positive, which means the bigger number is going to go here. The factors of 18 are 1 and 18, 2 and 9, 3 and 6, and 3 and 6 are going to be the pair. When we do 6n minus 3n, we get 3n. So that's the pair we were looking for. Take the first factor, set it equal to 0. Take the second factor, set it equal to 0. And then the last step is to solve each of these. So either n has to be equal to -6, which would make this factor 0, or n has to equal 3, which would make that factor 0. Here we haven't. This is a horrible looking one. At first you say someone factored it for me, but they factored it with a 13 on the other side. So we only want to factor after we get 0 to one side. So this is sort of a waste for us. So the first thing I'm going to do is FOIL this out, because my goal has to get it set up as something equals 0. So that's going to be x squared, the first 2 terms, the outer terms, the inner terms, and the last terms. And then I'm going to combine these like terms. And lastly, I'll subtract 13 in order to get equals 0. So again, don't factor until you have that 0, because 0 is the only thing that has the property we're looking for. So in this case, we have a -48, so we're going to have one positive and one negative factor. And this is going to be our bigger number because that 2 is positive. And if you run through our factors of 48, -1 and 48, -2 and 24, -3 and 16, -4 and 12, -6 and 8, those are the 2 that we're looking for. X plus 8 equals 0, x minus 6 equals 0. So either x equals -8 or x equals 6. So you're not going to have a whole test of ones that are trickier like this, but if you happen to get one that's factored but without 0, you are going to have to sort of undo everything and start fresh. This one here is in this one, we don't have 0 to one side, so first step is going to be to subtract 16 from both sides. And this is one of those special homework 28 problems. We have x minus 4 and x plus 4 equaling 0. It's the difference of 2 squares. And so factor 1 could be 0, or the second factor could be 0. So we get x equals 4 or x equals -4. Some people just like take a square root and say the answer is 4. No, there really are these 2 different factors that you get. You get 4 or -4. If you have any questions, let me know.